The champagne glass slipped from Elena's fingers, but she didn't hear it shatter. All she could hear was the pounding of her own heart as she stared at the message on her phone. The screen glowed in the darkness of the hotel bathroom, the shocking betrayal, illuminating words that would destroy everything she thought she knew about love. Tomorrow, you marry him. But tonight, you're still mine. Room 4-1. I'm waiting. The message that shattered everything. Welcome to Heartfire Obsession. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. The sender? Marcus Webb, her fiancé's best man. The man who'd stood beside them through every moment of their 3-year relationship. The man who was supposed to give the toast at their wedding reception in less than 12 hours. Elena's hands trembled as she scrolled up through the conversation history. Messages she'd never sent. Photos she'd never taken. An entire affair documented in digital evidence. Except none of it was real. Or was it? The perfect life, the perfect lie. 6 months earlier, Elena Martinez had believed she was living a fairy tale. At 28, she'd built a successful career as an interior designer in Manhattan, transforming cold spaces into warm homes for clients who paid her generously for the gift. But her greatest achievement wasn't professional. It was David Chen, the man who'd proposed to her on a rooftop in Brooklyn with the entire city sparkling behind him like a crown of stars. David was everything she'd ever wanted. Successful, kind, devastatingly handsome with his sharp jawline and eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He ran a tech startup that had just secured its second round of funding. He remembered her coffee order, surprised her with flowers on random Tuesdays, and made her laugh until her stomach hurt. And Marcus? Marcus had been there from the beginning. David's college roommate, his business partner, his brother, in everything but blood. Tall and brooding where David was bright and open, Marcus had always watched Elena with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. But she dismissed it as his personality. Some people were just intense. She'd been wrong. The night before forever. The rehearsal dinner had been perfect. Elena's mother had cried into her champagne. David's father had given a speech about love that lasted 20 minutes too long, but touched everyone's hearts. The bridesmaids had giggled over their plates while the groomsmen told embarrassing stories from college. Marcus had been quiet all evening. Elena noticed because she'd been trained to notice details. The way he'd barely touched his food. The way his jaw clenched when David kissed her cheek. The way he'd excused himself 3 times to take calls, returning each time with his face a shade paler. After dinner, as guests mingled in the hotel bar, Marcus had pulled David aside. Elena watched them from across the room, saw David's expression shift from confused to concerned to something that looked almost like fear. Then Marcus had clapped him on the shoulder, and both men had smiled. But it was the kind of smile people wear when they're hiding pain. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed. The trap closes. Now Elena stood in the bathroom, her wedding dress hanging on the back of the door like a ghost of the future she was supposed to have. Her bridesmaids were in the suite's living room, already half drunk on champagne and nostalgia. Her mother was asleep in the adjoining room, exhausted from weeks of planning. And Elena was reading messages that couldn't possibly be real, but looked absolutely authentic. Another message appeared. I told you I'd ruin him if you went through with this. Room 412. Last chance to explain before I show David everything. Her breath caught. This wasn't a confession. It was blackmail. Elena's mind raced. She'd never been to room 412. She'd never sent these messages. But the photos, God, the photos looked real. Her face, her body, in compromising positions with someone whose features were always just slightly out of focus. Professional manipulation, but convincing enough to destroy a relationship. Someone had set her up. And she had approximately 7 hours before her wedding to figure out who and why. the choice. She could ignore it. Block the number. Tell David in the morning and hope he believed her over fabricated evidence. Or she could go to room 412 and confront whoever was behind this twisted game. Elena looked at herself in the mirror. Her dark hair was still perfect from the rehearsal, her makeup flawless, her dress for tomorrow pressed and waiting. She looked like a bride. She looked like someone who had everything to lose. She thought about David's proposal, the way he'd gotten down on one knee and said, "You're the only person I want to build a life with, not because you're perfect, but because your imperfections fit mine." She thought about Marcus's strange behavior, his intensity, the way he'd looked at her tonight like she was already a ghost. And she thought about the person behind these messages, someone who knew exactly how to destroy her life with surgical precision. Elena made her decision. She deleted the messages, turned off her phone, and walked back into the suite where her bridesmaids were laughing over embarrassing photos from college. She smiled, poured herself more champagne, and pretended everything was fine. Because she'd realized something crucial in that bathroom. Whoever sent those messages expected her to panic, expected her to run to room 412 like a frightened animal into a trap. But Elena Martinez hadn't built her career by being predictable. If someone wanted to play games with her wedding, her reputation, her life, she would play. But she would play to win. Tomorrow, she would marry David Chen, and then she would systematically destroy whoever tried to stop her. The shadow in the corner. What Elena didn't see as she rejoined her friends was the figure watching from the darkened balcony across the courtyard. A man with a camera, documenting every moment. A man who'd been watching her for 6 months, learning her patterns, studying her weaknesses, preparing for this exact night. Marcus Webb lowered his camera and smiled. Everything was going according to plan. But in room 412, someone else was waiting. Someone who knew Marcus's plan. Someone who had plans of their own. And in her hotel suite, as Elena laughed with her bridesmaids and counted down the hours to her wedding, she pulled out a second phone. The one no one knew about, the one she'd been using to investigate Marcus Webb for the past 3 weeks. Because Elena had her own secrets. And tomorrow's wedding was just the beginning of a revenge that had been months in the making. The question was, who would strike first? Heartbreak and revenge. The morning after nothing. Elena didn't sleep. How could she, knowing that somewhere in this hotel, someone was orchestrating her destruction? At 4 a.m., she gave up pretending, slipped out of the suite while her bridesmaids snored softly, and took the elevator down to the hotel's business center. The room was empty, sterile, lit by the cold glow of computer screens. Elena sat down and opened her second phone, the one she'd bought with cash 3 weeks ago after she'd started noticing things. Small things, wrong things. Like how Marcus always seemed to show up wherever she and David went. How he'd offered to help with wedding planning, but then sabotaged vendors with late cancellations. How he'd suggested the hotel for their rehearsal dinner, insisting it was the best venue, almost desperate for them to choose it. And then there was the woman. The photograph that started everything. 3 weeks ago, Elena had been meeting a client at a cafe in the West Village when she'd seen Marcus through the window. He was sitting with a woman, blonde and elegant, her hand covering his across the table. The intimacy between them was obvious, but that wasn't what caught Elena's attention. It was the photograph the woman slid across the table. Even from a distance, Elena could see it was of David, young, maybe college-aged, at a party. And Marcus's expression when he looked at it had been pure anguish. Elena had taken a photo of them with her phone, zoomed in as much as she could, and tried to dismiss it. Maybe Marcus had a girlfriend David didn't know about. Maybe they were looking at old photos for the wedding video. But something felt wrong. So, she'd started digging. The truth in the digital shadows. What she'd found in 3 weeks of careful investigation would have broken most people. Bank records she shouldn't have been able to access, but did, thanks to a former client who owed her a favor and worked in financial forensics. Text messages recovered from David's old laptop, the one he'd given her to use for wedding planning. Marcus Webb wasn't just David's best friend. 6 years ago, he'd been David's boyfriend. They'd been together in college, a relationship kept secret from Marcus's conservative family. David had wanted to go public, to live authentically. Marcus had refused, terrified of losing his inheritance, his father's respect, his place in the family business. So David had ended it, met Elena 2 years later, moved on. But Marcus never had. The woman in the photograph. Elena scrolled through the research on her secret phone. The blonde woman's name was Vanessa Wright, a private investigator Marcus had hired 5 months ago, right after David and Elena announced their engagement. Her job, find anything that could break them up. An affair, a secret, a weakness. But Elena was clean. No skeletons, no scandals, nothing to exploit. So Marcus had decided to create something. The fake messages, the doctored photos, they were all Vanessa's work. Professional-grade manipulation designed to look authentic enough to plant doubt, to make David question everything. But here's what Marcus didn't know. Vanessa had sent Elena a message 2 days ago. A warning, brief and anonymous, from a burner account that deleted itself after being read. He's going to destroy your wedding. Room 412. Be careful who you trust. Elena had traced the account, found Vanessa, and made a deal. Money, a lot of it, for the truth and for help with what came next. The wedding day begins. At 6 a.m., Elena returned to her suite. Her mother was awake, sipping coffee, looking at her daughter with eyes that saw too much. "You didn't sleep," her mother said. Not a question. "No. But you're still getting married." Elena poured herself coffee, her hands steady. "Yes." Her mother set down her cup. "Elena Maria Martinez. I raised you to be many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. What's going on?" For a moment, Elena considered telling her everything. But her mother had dreamed of this wedding almost as much as Elena had sewn beads onto the dress by hand, had planned every detail with the joy of a woman watching her only daughter marry for love. "Mom," Elena said carefully, "if I asked you whether love was more important than revenge, what would you say?" Her mother's expression shifted. "I'd say love should be more important. But I'd also say that sometimes revenge is love in a different form. Protection. Justice." "Why?" Elena kissed her mother's forehead. "Just wondering." The ceremony. The wedding began at 11 a.m. in the hotel's garden, under an arch of white roses that had cost more than Elena's first car. Guests filled the chairs, whispered about how beautiful everything looked, how perfect the couple was. Elena walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her dress a cascade of silk and lace that caught the morning light. She looked at David waiting at the altar, saw the tears in his eyes, the love on his face, and felt her heart crack. Because she knew what she had to do. Marcus stood beside David, playing his role perfectly. Best man, loyal friend, face arranged in appropriate joy. But Elena saw the truth now, the way his hands clenched, the way his jaw worked, the way he looked at David like a man watching his entire world slip through his fingers. The officiant began. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." Elena barely heard it. She was counting down, waiting. The interruption. "If anyone here has reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever, hold your peace." The traditional words, usually just ceremonial. But today, Elena felt the entire garden hold its breath. Marcus shifted. Elena saw it, the micro-movement, the intake of breath. He was going to do it, going to object, to pull out his phone, to show everyone the fabricated evidence of Elena's fake affair. But Elena moved first. "I do," she said clearly. "I object." The garden erupted in confused murmurs. David's eyes went wide. "Elena, what?" She turned to face him fully, took his hands, and said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Because I need to tell you something before we do this. Something I learned 3 weeks ago that you deserve to know." David's face drained of color. Marcus went perfectly still. Elena looked directly at Marcus, smiled, and said, "Your best man is in love with you. Has been for 6 years, and he hired someone to destroy our wedding because he never got over losing you." The silence that followed. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. David turned to Marcus, his expression shifting from shock to recognition to something that looked almost like grief. "Marcus? Is this true?" Marcus's carefully constructed mask shattered. "David, is it true?" David's voice cracked. "Yes." The word came out broken. "Yes, it's true. All of it. I never stopped. I couldn't." But Elena wasn't finished. She pulled out her second phone, held it up, and here's the evidence. The private investigator you hired, Marcus. The fake messages you had created. The photos you doctored. The plan to humiliate me in front of everyone I love, to break David's heart so badly he'd have no one left to turn to but you. She looked at the crowd, at the shocked faces, the whispers growing louder. This man spent $50,000 trying to destroy my life. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I fell in love with someone he couldn't let go of. Marcus lunged forward, but David caught his arm. "Don't. Just don't." "David, please," Marcus begged. "I did it for us. She doesn't understand you like I do. She doesn't know the real you, the person you were before. Before I chose to be honest about who I am," David's voice was cold now. "Before I decided living a lie wasn't worth keeping people comfortable, that's what you can't forgive, isn't it? Not that I stopped loving you, but that I started loving myself." Elena watched them, these 2 men with years of history she could never fully understand, and felt something unexpected, pity for Marcus. He looked destroyed, his face crumpling like paper. But pity didn't mean forgiveness. The choice David makes. "Everyone, please leave," David said to the crowd. "Give us a moment." "David," Elena started. "Please," he said gently. "I need to talk to Marcus alone, just for a minute." Elena nodded, squeezed his hand, and walked back up the aisle through a crowd of whispering guests. Her mother caught her arm. "That was either the bravest or most foolish thing I've ever seen. Maybe both," Elena whispered. From the garden, she heard raised voices. Marcus shouting, then crying. David's responses too quiet to make out. Then silence. 5 minutes later, David emerged alone. His tie was crooked, his eyes red. He walked straight to Elena, pulled her aside and said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For bringing him into our lives. For not seeing what he was becoming. For," his voice broke, "for making you deal with this on what should have been the happiest day of your life." Elena cupped his face. "David Chen, I fell in love with you knowing you had a past. Everyone does. This isn't your fault. I still want to marry you," he said. "If you still want me." After all this, she kissed him softly. "Ask me again tomorrow, when we're not surrounded by 200 people and a wedding that cost $40,000. He laughed, broken and relieved. "Tomorrow, then." The aftermath. The wedding didn't happen that day. Guests left confused and gossiping. The hotel refunded their money for the reception. Elena's dress was carefully packed away. Marcus Webb disappeared from their lives entirely. No goodbye, no apology, just gone. 3 days later, Elena received a letter from Vanessa Wright with a check returning half the money Elena had paid her, and a note. "Some revenge isn't worth the cost. He's destroyed enough. Move on." But Elena couldn't move on. Not yet. Because 2 weeks later, she received a package at her apartment. Inside was a flash drive and a note in Marcus's handwriting, "You won." But you don't know the whole story. If you want the truth about why I really did this, watch this. Then decide if David's still worth marrying. M. Elena held the flash drive, felt its weight, and knew that whatever was on it would change everything one more time. The question was, did she want to know? David walked in from the kitchen, saw her holding the drive. "What's that?" Elena looked at the man she loved, thought about the wedding that never happened, the revenge that felt hollow now that it was over, and the secrets that apparently still remained. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "But I think we need to watch it together. Because if Marcus's game had taught her anything, it was that secrets festered in darkness. And whatever truth he wanted them to see, they would face it the same way they'd faced everything else. Together. The ultimate payback. The truth on the screen. They watched the video that night, sitting together on Elena's couch with untouched wine glasses on the coffee table. David's hand was cold in hers as Marcus's face appeared on the laptop screen. He looked terrible. Unshaven, eyes hollow, sitting in what appeared to be a cheap motel room. But his voice was steady when he spoke. "David, Elena, if you're watching this, it means you decided the truth matters more than moving on. I respect that. So here it is, the whole truth." Marcus took a breath, and what came next shattered everything Elena thought she knew. The cancer that changed everything. "David, 6 months before you met Elena, I was diagnosed with brain cancer. Stage 3 glioblastoma. I had surgery, radiation, the works. You never knew, because I swore everyone to secrecy. My parents, our mutual friends, everyone. I told them I was traveling for work." Elena felt David go rigid beside her. Marcus continued, "The doctors gave me 5 years at best. But there was a complication. The tumor was in a region that affects emotional regulation, decision-making. They warned me I might become obsessive, might fixate on things, lose control of impulses I'd normally suppress." He laughed bitterly. They were right. As the tumor grew back, as the treatments failed, I started to fixate. On you, David. On what we had. On the life I convinced myself we should have had if I'd been braver. 3 months ago, they told me I have less than a year. And something in me just broke. I thought if I could just break you and Elena up, if I could show you she wasn't right for you, you'd see that we were meant to be together before it was too late. The accomplice. But Marcus wasn't finished. There's more. The woman, Vanessa Wright? She wasn't just a private investigator I hired. She's my half-sister. My father's daughter from an affair he kept hidden for 30 years. She contacted me 2 years ago, wanting to connect, to build a relationship. Elena's breath caught. This explained why Vanessa had warned her, had sent that anonymous message. Marcus looked directly at the camera. "I told her everything about you, David. About us. And she came up with the plan. Not to help me win you back, but to force you to acknowledge what we had. To make you see me one last time before I died." His eyes filled with tears. But she grew a conscience. Started warning Elena, trying to stop me. We fought about it. She told me I was using my diagnosis as an excuse to be cruel. She was right. So here's what I'm telling you now. On this drive, along with this video, there are medical records proving everything. Hospital bills, diagnosis reports, brain scans showing the tumor. All of it. Marcus wiped his eyes. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking for your pity. I'm just giving you context. So you can decide what to do with it." He stood up, moved closer to the camera. "David, you were the only person I ever truly loved. And Elena, You were the only person strong enough to love him the way he deserves. I tried to destroy that, because I was afraid of dying alone with regret. I failed. Thank God I failed. The video ended, the silence between them. David sat motionless for a long time. Elena didn't know what to say. How do you process this? A love story twisted by literal brain damage? A betrayal rooted in terminal illness and desperate fear? Finally, David spoke. He's dying. Yes. And he destroyed our wedding because a tumor was making him obsessive, apparently. David turned to her, his eyes searching. What do we do? Elena had been asking herself the same question. The revenge she'd planned, the satisfaction of exposing Marcus, suddenly felt hollow. He hadn't been a villain motivated by simple jealousy. He'd been a dying man whose brain was literally failing, whose impulses and obsessions had been amplified by disease. But that didn't erase what he'd done. The humiliation, the fear, the way he'd tried to weaponize fake evidence against her. I don't know, she admitted. Part of me wants to send him to hell for what he did. But part of me just feels sad? David supplied. Yeah. Really, really sad. The hospital visit. 3 days later, they made a decision. Together, they drove to the hospital where Marcus had listed himself as a patient in his medical records. St. Vincent's, the oncology ward. They found him in room 847, looking even worse than in the video. Thin, pale, hooked up to machines that beeped steady rhythms of borrowed time. He saw them, and his expression crumpled. You came. We watched your video, David said, sitting in the chair beside the bed. Elena stood near the door, arms crossed, still wary. I meant what I said. Every word. David nodded slowly. I know. And I'm sorry. Sorry that you got sick. Sorry that I didn't know. Sorry that your brain is doing this to you. But? Marcus asked, hearing the word David hadn't said. But it doesn't excuse what you did. The cancer might explain your obsession, Marcus, but you still chose how to act on it. You hired Vanessa. You created those fake messages. You tried to destroy Elena because you decided your feelings mattered more than her life. Marcus closed his eyes. I know. Elena speaks. Elena stepped forward then. I spent weeks hating you, planning how to expose you, how to make you suffer for what you did. And then I watched that video and realized something. Marcus looked at her. You're already suffering. More than I could ever make you suffer. And continuing to hate you just means your disease wins. It means you successfully poisoned our happiness even though we stopped the wedding. She pulled a chair up to the other side of his bed. So here's what's going to happen. David and I are going to get married. A small ceremony, just family. You're not invited. Marcus nodded, tears sliding down his cheeks. But, Elena continued, we're not going to press charges. We're not going to destroy your reputation. We're not going to tell your parents why you really did what you did. We're going to let you have whatever dignity you have left. Why? Marcus whispered. Because, David said softly, a long time ago, you were my friend before you were anything else. And I'd rather remember that person than what you became. Elena reached out, surprisingly herself, and took Marcus's hand. And because I asked myself what kind of person I want to be. Someone who kicks a dying man when he's down? Or someone who's strong enough to choose mercy even when revenge would feel better? Marcus sobbed openly then, his whole body shaking. I don't deserve this. No, Elena agreed. You don't. But we deserve peace. And we can't have that while we're focused on destroying you. The wedding that almost wasn't. 6 weeks later, Elena and David got married in Elena's mother's garden in Queens. 20 people, a simple ceremony, vows they wrote themselves. When David slipped the ring onto Elena's finger, he said, "I promise to build a life with you that's stronger than any secret, any past, any ghost that tries to haunt us." When Elena said her vows, she promised to love you not despite your past, but with full knowledge of it, to choose you every day, to fight for us, even when it's complicated. They didn't have a best man. David's brother stood beside him instead. 2 days before the wedding, they'd received a card from Marcus. Inside was a simple message: "Thank you for the mercy. Use the money I spent hiring Vanessa to have a beautiful honeymoon. You've earned it. M." Attached was a check for $50,000. They debated cashing it, but ultimately decided to donate it to brain cancer research in Marcus's name. Revenge, they'd learned, wasn't always about destruction. Sometimes it was about transforming pain into something that might help others. 6 months later, Elena was at her design studio when her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Miss Martinez? This is Vanessa Wright." Elena sat down slowly. "How did you get this number?" "I'm a private investigator, remember?" A pause. "I'm calling about Marcus. He passed away this morning. Peacefully, according to hospice." Elena closed her eyes. "Thank you for telling me. There's more. He left something for you and David. Letters. I'm his executor. Can I drop them off?" The final letters. That evening, Elena and David sat together again, this time with 2 sealed envelopes. David's letter was short. "You gave me the best years of my life, even if I couldn't see it at the time. Thank you for the grace you showed me at the end. Die in peace, knowing you're loved. M." Elena's letter was longer. "Elena, you're probably wondering why I'm writing to you specifically. Here's why. You saved David when I was trying to destroy him. You were strong enough to fight for your love, even when I tried to take it away. You taught me that real love isn't about possession or control. It's about wanting someone to be happy, even if it's not with you. I spent my last months thinking about that, about how I could have loved David better by letting him go sooner, by celebrating his happiness instead of trying to sabotage it. I'm gone now. The tumor won. But you won too. You got to marry the man we both loved, and you'll get to build a life I never could have given him. There's a word for what you showed me at the hospital. Grace. Unearned, undeserved mercy. I'm taking that with me wherever I'm going next. Tell David I'm sorry I couldn't be the friend he needed, and tell him that in the end, I understood why he chose you. Because you're exactly the kind of person worth being chosen for. Live well, love hard, make him happy. And thank you for teaching a dying man what real love looks like. Marcus Webb." The epilogue. Elena folded the letter carefully and set it aside. David was crying softly, and she pulled him close. "He really loved you," she whispered. "I know, and I really loved him once. But I love you more. I love you better." They sat together in the quiet of their apartment, holding each other, grieving for the man Marcus had been and the tragedy of what he'd become. Outside, the city sparkled with 1,000 lights. Life continued, indifferent to love and loss, to revenge and mercy, to the small human dramas that meant everything to the people living them. Elena thought about the wedding that almost wasn't, about the revenge she'd planned and then abandoned, about the complexity of loving someone whose past included loving someone else. And she realized that all of this, the betrayal and forgiveness, the anger and grace, the pain and healing, this was what made love real. Not the perfect moments, but surviving the imperfect ones together. David lifted his head, kissed her softly. "Thank you." "For what?" for choosing mercy over revenge, for being stronger than I knew anyone could be, for loving me even when my past tried to destroy our future." Elena smiled. Always, because in the end, that was the ultimate revenge against Marcus's plan. Not destroying him, but building something so strong that even his best efforts to tear it apart had only made it stronger. They'd won. Not by fighting harder, but by choosing love when hate would have been easier. And that, Elena thought as she fell asleep in her husband's arms, was the kind of victory that actually meant something, the kind that lasted, the kind worth fighting for.